The Battle of Carrhae was the ancient precursor to True Promise number 4. The Romans launched an unprovoked attack on Iran and they were totally defeated. Like now, I wanted to mention one of my sources. I've been using it for several years. I was studying Iran before the war. Palestine, too. The Iranica is a high-quality encyclopedia produced by a network of Iranian scholars in Iran and outside of Iran. It needs to replace Encyclopedia Britannica. Something like this should replace Encyclopedia Britannica. Maybe all the free peoples together, the Cubans, North Koreans, the Palestinians, the Iranians, can write something, and replace it. Not every country has the history and the resources to make something like Iranica, but this is the ideal here. And not to trust online encyclopedias like Wikipedia. If you look at the source, just because you cite something doesn't mean you've got a good argument. You're as good as your sources, and you'll see, on the 66-day war that Hezbollah won, they cite think tanks, conservative imperial think tanks. So they're biased, and clearly, as we're seeing now in South Lebanon, Hezbollah was not degraded. The ceasefire benefited both sides. Only one side abided by the treaty, ceasefire, and one side seems to have made most use of the time. Perfect blend of, moral, legal, religious virtue into one in one war from one side, while the other side broke it about 15,000 times. Okay, let's not get off into the weeds here. Let's stay focused on Iran. So Iranica is a great source, online encyclopedia. Let's move on to context for the Battle of Carrhae. So the Roman Republic was a settler colonial regime. They colonized Italy. And then the rest of Europe, and we're paying the price for that still today. The Parthians were ruled by a dynasty. It was a kingdom. The Parthians were Iranians. They led the resistance against the Greeks. The successor kingdoms of Alexander, Iran was occupied after Alexander's genocide and conquest, and that's the conclusion, that's the end of the story that the West leaves out, that the Iranians liberated Iran, led by the Parthians. They were Persianized Iranians. It was it wasn't as centralized as the Achaemenids or the Sassanids. It was a decentralized empire governed by aristocratic Persianized elites, Parthian aristocratic clans. So, it reminds me of the No Kings protest. I'll take a king, if he's a native. Roman Republic versus the Parthians, Parthian kingdom. I'm for the kings. I'm for the king of kings. The Parthian king was called the king of kings, which means he's the legitimate ruler of the land. That's the title of the old Persian Empire. So that means that most of the Iranian peoples that actually lived there respected him, the king. So Arsacid dynasty, Parthian dynasty, and the king Herodes, the general Serena, we'll get to him in a moment. I'm not opposed to empire. That may sound awkward, but if it's a defensive hegemony to protect yourselves from Romans or Americans, I'm for that. I'm not for free speech. I'm not for that either. So many Western ideals have been discredited. In Iran, they're polite, but, the monarchists, the Pahlavists, I wouldn't tolerate that during wartime. Put them in prison. Okay, so the Parthian Empire was good. It was a defensive, hegemonic rule over West Asia to defend themselves from the Romans. And as soon as I say that, a liberal would probably say that I'm a fascist because I want a strong military. Well, I want a strong military for the natives so that they can resist your armies when they invade. Liberals are wolves in sheep's clothing. They're not friends. They want to They want to disarm the natives. Okay, material continuity in Iranian geography and history. Yeah, the Romans had long lines of communication and supply, not quite as long as the Americans, but long. Their base was the Mediterranean basin, and they had to protect their lines of communication and supply when they would invade Iran. That's why invading from the Caucasus with the mountains protecting them was easier. Crassus, arrogant, hubristic, ignored the advice of the Armenians and invaded straight across Assyria. Iran, yeah, the Achaemenids, they put down revolts, but they didn't commit wholesale genocide, and they didn't have a slave-based economy like the Romans. So again, yeah, not every empire is the same. Every Iranian empire or state or republic like now is multi-ethnic. That's another thing. That's a constant. So it's different than the fake multiculturalism of the West. That doesn't respect anybody's culture. They want to legitimize invaders like white settlers, and then they want to tell the natives to get along with these people. That's not really a multicultural civilization. That would be Iran in reality, because they have actual real native cultures. They are different, and it's not an imperial monoculture. So yeah, you've got peoples that have lived there for thousands of years. The Persians, the Farsi-speaking people. There's the Kurds, they're Iranians. And the Lurs and the Bakhtiari. So it's, yeah, I mean, obviously Iran is much older than the USA, but it's not just the number of years, which are 2,500 years versus 250. They're different. I would describe Iran as the civilization, and the USA is whatever attacks civilizations. That's, yeah, okay. It's civilization versus whatever that thing is over there that attacks civilizations. It's called a settler colony. Yeah, the Americans, they like the white Europeans. They were like, yeah, I couldn't figure it out until the Palestinian cause gave me the terminology and the grammar to think about all this stuff. But it's like the Europeans landed here in North America, whatever, and just totally like forfeited their land, their language, their culture, everything to become Americans. It's like Israelis, you know. Okay. Yeah, we should say something like, so I said before, this is 53 BCE, the Roman Republic versus a liberated Iran. But let's talk a little bit about Alexander the Accursed. Yeah, what do I think of him? What can I say about him? He's idolized by the West, the genocidal West. He committed a genocide in Iran. He died from a mosquito. I think that's fitting. Yeah, there's a lot of violent people in the world who meet ignominious ends, and they richly deserve their inglorious ends, demises. George S. Patton, he's another one, you know, aristocrat. I was in a space the other day where they were talking about the bonus army, the veterans who wanted to get paid, you know, for World War I, stupid war to get involved in. Patton was one of the officers that attacked them, attacked his own citizens, attacked soldiers. He's no friend of soldiers. He likes slapping them, too. And it's like Alexander, you know, no, I wouldn't call Patton a conqueror. I mean, the Russians won the war, but it's like, yeah, he died in a car wreck, and Alexander died from malaria. It's like, yeah, you deserve it. You're losers. I mean, just other people get the credit. I mean, Alexander had officers. The army was built by his father, who wanted to attack Iran also, Persia. I mean, he had no sons, Alexander. That's why the great Alexander Empire, the fake, whatever he was going to do, it would have been fake, you know. He occupied West Asia, Iran, and he didn't have any sons, and it broke up his whole empire between Egypt, Macedon, and occupied Greece and the Seleucid Empire. And, yeah, he had two mutinies. And murdered a third of his army when he wanted to march across a desert because he heard that Hercules did it or something. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've studied this. But yeah, a total disaster, marching his army across a desert. And yeah, he was offered water and he threw it away. And it's like, yeah, thanks for the theatrical display of comradeship. Maybe next time just don't march us across the desert. Let's see. Yeah, enough on him. So what happened to what's the story of the resistance that drove the Greeks out? It was kind of like an ancient axis of resistance. You had the Romans, who were allied with the Parthians then, common enemy, and the Jews. Yeah, the Maccabees. Yeah, that's interesting. That's further proof. If you look at this time period, it's about a century before Julius Caesar, about 2 centuries before Jesus, if you're a Christian. The Maccabees revolted against the Seleucid Empire. That's the remnants of Alexander's empire in West Asia. They revolted, and it's like proof. It's like not really complicated. If it's an occupation, it's either you are for the invaders or you're for the natives. The natives are the people revolting. Simple. The Maccabees. This was a time period when the Jews were native. They're not now. They are the occupation. And, of course, it's a little more complicated than that. There were Jews Israelites who were left in Judah after they were defeated by the Babylonians. Then the Persians sent them back, and they were a proxy for Persia. That was the loyal faction, the ones that were sent back, the ones liberated. The Babylonian captivity. It's obviously portrayed as a good thing in the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, but there were other peoples that were liberated. The Canaanites didn't agree with the Jews. They saw it as a rival cult. They were Semites. I don't want to focus just on the Jews all the time. That's Jewish supremacism. There's other people here that are in the story, like the Samaritans, who had to resist the Judeans for a long time. I'm for the Samaritans. We know they're local, and it's funny how the Judeans in their Bible would try to say that no, the Samaritans aren't. They're mixed. It's like, man, you can see kind of the origins of ethnic supremacism in the Old Testament. When you have a chosen people and define it, that way. Not so in other cultures. Okay. Okay, well, once we got the Greeks out of the way, then you have the Romans fighting everybody. Crassus is Trump. Okay, so Crassus was a member of the triumvirate when the late Republic was basically dead already. You had Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus. Crassus was at one time the richest man in Rome. Pompey surpassed him, and that must have made him jealous. Similarities with Trump. He always wants to be the richest man, but other people are richer than him, and he can't take defeats or criticism. Yeah, I think Crassus was definitely a smarter person, though. Yeah, and an actual soldier. He fought against Spartacus. Spartacus outmaneuvered him and defeated him so many times, so he had to do something more, so he attacks Parthia. This is where the glory is. Yeah. Totally unprepared and hubristic, like Trump. Yeah. Both are oligarchs. There's some parallels here. What did Parthia do to Crassus? Nothing. Every so often I'll see the videos produced from the Islamic Republic, and they'll put people's names on the missiles to avenge them. I don't know what the Parthians knew of the greatest slave revolt up until that time and up until Haiti. Yeah, I wonder what the Parthians thought of that. But Crassus, the invader, was the man who put the revolt down and crucified 6,000 freedom fighters along the Via Appia, the Appian Way. And yes, Parthia avenged Spartacus, avenged the defeat. Yes. Yeah, it wasn't like a coordinated thing, but the empire had enemies on all fronts, and anybody who resisted slowed the empire down. Finally, you had the Parthians and then the Germanic tribes who finally stopped the Romans in their tracks. Let's talk more about, the Republic again. So there was opposition to Crassus. Cicero said the war was it was unjust. There was no reason for it. There was a tribune who tried to stop Crassus's army from leaving. They must have shoved him out of the way, and then he placed an entire curse on the whole army. He was successful. People said, "Hey, man, that curse was really good." But yeah, you can tell the Republic is dead. When the people had power, if you touched a tribune, you were sacrosanct. The tribune is sacrosanct. You can't touch him. No oligarch or any of their thugs can touch the officers of the people. You could be hung for that. Now, look, co-opted by the elites. But, you had some people like this guy trying to do what he's supposed to do. The people were not served by this war on Iran. And like the Republic today, did I wouldn't call it resistance, the opposition, the criticism, the protesting, did that stop Crassus from invading? No. No, I think all of us have learned republics suck. I've written letters and gotten no responses or stupid responses. There's your republic. I don't care about it. I'm not impressed by it. It doesn't impress me. Thailand's a monarchy. Yeah, no empire, no colonies, no genocides. Good for them. Yeah, so republic versus the kingdom of Parthia. I'll take the kingdom. I'll take the king of kings. Pretexts. Yeah, Mike was talking to me about Armenia. I don't know. I'm sure the Crassus made up something. Who cares? I know that he was told to attack Iran from the Caucasian mountains to protect his line of retreat and supplies and everything. And the Armenians could aid him. By Armenians, I mean the proxy king, It's kind of like Erdogan and MBS. They don't represent their people. As for the pretexts, I don't know, but his fellow triumvir, Julius Caesar, used the following pretext. And like post-Al-Aqsa flood, we can look back at Libya and the Balkans and know when the West was bullshitting us. Here's an example of bullshit. So there was a migration of one free people, the Helvetians, into the land of a Roman ally. It's not an ally, it's a proxy. The Roman Empire has no business north of the Alps. It's an empire. All empires are illegitimate. All empires can be attacked everywhere and anywhere. So, sure, the Aedui can defend their territory from the Helvetians. It's just they asked for help from the Romans, and what do the Romans do? Well, their help wasn't without conditions. It's like you be a proxy for empire, and they served the interests of the Roman invasion, conquest, and occupation of the peoples of Gaul. Gaul is a fiction. The Romans made it up, but the people's there. Okay, so that's what an example of pretext looks like in Roman times. It's the same kind of like, you can feel it corrupt you, the propaganda that overcomplicates stuff. It's like Yugoslavia. You just attacked a free people. Don't act like you're doing anything other than that. Okay, Europeans ignoring history. Yeah. Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Well, natives don't forget their history. Maybe Europeans do. And so they keep repeating the same mistake over and over again. I mean, knowing your history is what it's all about when you're native. That's why you're native. You have an actual history, unlike a settler colony, like the Jewish one, the Jewish colony. Yeah, and to be able to say that is a defeat of Jewish supremacism, a genocidal Jewish supremacism. Yes, it's a Jewish colony. I'll use the name that the natives themselves call themselves. Or, excuse me, the invaders. Okay. Yeah, and this is not an ancient analogy, but let's look at the Operation Barbarossa. It is kind of interesting because the Nazis started the war in World War II, well, at least in Europe, is the Russo-German War. That's not even a front. That is the war. I don't, the Nazi Germany started the war that provided the world the means to get rid of them. That's the irony of it. Same now with Iran. Americans started the war, and they started the war to finally free the region. It's great. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's not just how Iran is obviously older, but it's the quality of the civilization. It's okay. Reza Pahlavi, the Shah. Yeah. Was Mithridates III. Well, he was once the leader, the West's puppet in Iran, but he was driven out by the revolution. Mithridates III had an army. He was a Parthian trader in Mesopotamia, and he held it, but was later defeated and killed. So he wasn't able to go into exile like the perverted loser coward Reza Pahlavi. Yeah, he was defeated after the battle by the Serena, if that was his name or not, the Parthian commander. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the Parthians didn't hide their missiles either. This was before the war, but I saw Laith Marouf and Hadi Hotet of Free Palestine TV go to Iran and go to the museum where they're showcasing their brilliantly engineered missiles, their arsenal. They said to the West, these are weapons, and they told what they're going to do with them. If you attack us, we're going to destroy you. Whereas the contrast between U.S. and Iran, I was listening to Justin Poder of the Anti-Empire Project make this argument that one side is secretive, cunning, insidious, tries to have some, tries to keep the myth of white civilization above that of the natives, like we're so powerful, we have technology you'll never have, Whereas the Iranians just say, okay, well, here's our stuff. Same here. Like the Romans knew that the Parthians were good archers. They knew that they had cavalry archers. Most of the Turkic Iranian peoples were excellent horsemen, excellent horse archers. They're like the Mongols, excellent mobility and firepower, missile power, whatever. They knew that already. They were just hubristic. They just thought they could just do anything they want, march into Iran and win, because they had been beating up on peoples in this region for decades. They just thought they could do that without even knowing the enemy. First rule of war: know your enemy. It was there possible to know and study the Parthians, but okay, by then, the Romans were, every empire, if they win too many easy victories, they're going to set themselves up for one hell of a disaster. Okay, and the result of Carrhae was, well, the Romans weren't driven out of West Asia, but they missed their opportunity to conquer the Iranian plateau, I think, permanently. It was a crushing defeat. Like, the Romans hadn't suffered a defeat like that in a long time. Same here with the Americans, the American Empire. We've seen the Americans lose, but not lose in such a humiliating fashion as this, where you have even jets being shot down, like air defense. That's something neat. And yeah, on the topic of hubris, we'll wrap up with this. The first official meeting between the Romans and the Parthians, Sulla, Cornelius Sulla, the mass murderer, who helped bring down the first general to march on Rome and everything, yeah. He insisted that he sit higher than the king of Parthia. So you have this aristocrat, this Roman aristocrat. He demands that he sits higher than a king. And it's like, you're both oligarchs. You choose your figureheads differently. The Republic has elections. Okay. Trump was elected, whatever. The king is a dynasty. It's just, you're both oligarchs. Why can't you just show some fucking respect? Boy, you don't, like, in order to get respect for the Romans, you've got to beat the hell out of them, just like what we're seeing with the Americans. Okay, we'll end with that. I'll return with Mike to talk about the siege of Amida when Sassanid Persia, the Persians would take over resistance after the Parthians and keep resisting and defending against the Romans. Siege of Amida was when they went on offense. That always offends imperialists when you defend and then you want to take the fight to them. So we'll talk about that one next time.